Okay, just okay. All right. Well, I've been ready for a while. Just been listening to two of you chat along. Yeah, yeah. All right. Good afternoon. Yeah, I know you're all here to see our friend Tom Fletcher, who will be joining us as our guest in a few minutes. Who, as you know, is our emergency relief coordinator and Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. At 3 p.m., our friends from UN Women and DESA will be here to launch the Gender Snapshot 2025. We may have a background briefing later this afternoon, as I told you over the weekend, but details are still being worked out, so I ask for your patience, but we will let you know as soon as I know. Tomorrow, our guest briefer will be the Secretary General of the United Nations himself. As mentioned, he will be here at noon and on time. The press conference will be broadcast on web TV and YouTube and everywhere else, but we will not have a Zoom link. So if you want to ask questions, please try to be here in person. Starting with the situation in Gaza, and I can tell you that we condemn the deadly escalation of the Israeli military offensive, which we saw over the weekend across Gaza City, with scores of people reportedly killed or injured. As you can imagine, this is having an appalling impact on civilians enduring suffering and starvation. We reiterate our call for the protection of civilians and humanitarian personnel and full respect for international law. Yesterday, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, said that in the previous 4 days alone, 10 of UNRWA's buildings have been hit in Gaza City. This includes 7 schools and 2 clinics used as shelters for thousands of displaced people. Consequently, Mr. Lazzarini warned that the exhausted and terrified civilians are again being forced to leave northern Gaza. People are fleeing using the Al-Rashid Road, which is the only route available for the moment to the south. And as you can imagine, as you've seen from footage, it is extremely congested, to say the least. Over the past few days, colleagues monitoring the movements of people in Gaza counted almost 70,000 displacements heading south, primarily to Deir el-Bala and Khan Yunis. In the past month, partners observed about 150,000 movements from north to south. Yesterday, our colleagues at the World Food Programme said that forced displacement from Gaza cities exhausts families, resources, and disrupts their last lifelines. Without safe, sustained access, and the risk of worsening hunger grows, especially for children. Our partners report that 1/3 of malnutrition treatment facilities in Gaza City have already shut down due to forced displacement orders. Today, the Ministry of Health in Gaza said 3 more people died due to malnutrition and starvation over a span of 24 hours. Overall, the ministry reports that 425 people across Gaza have died due to malnutrition and starvation, and about 1/3 of that number refers to children. Our partners working in water and sanitation and hygiene sector have scaled up water production and are distributing water at reception points. They've also been able to increase the number of meals being provided in the last few days, distributing about 40,000 additional meals daily throughout Gaza. And as of Saturday, 558,000 daily meals were prepared and delivered by 20 partners through 116 kitchens. However, health services continue to be heavily constrained since clinics have suspended their services due to insecurity and displacement orders. In Deir el-Bala, more than half of the ambulances are now out of service, with a very limited number of ambulances to serve thousands of people. OCHA also reports that humanitarian movements inside Gaza continue to face impediments. Out of the 17 missions that our teams coordinated with the Israeli authorities, only 4 were facilitated. 7 missions were denied, including the delivery of water tanks to the north. Another 4 missions were impeded on the ground, but 3 of them were nevertheless accomplished. These included collection of fuel and food cargo from the Karim Shalom, Karim Abu Salam crossings. 2 other missions had to be canceled by the organizers. Our humanitarian colleagues continue to call for the unimpeded humanitarian access. Aid should flow at scale in Gaza through multiple crossing points into the south and the north. Additionally, our partners estimate that about 77% of the road network in Gaza has now been damaged, with Gaza and Khan Yunis governorates being the worst impacted. Turning to Sudan, first on the political front, the Secretary General's personal envoy for Sudan, Ramtam Lamamra, is currently in Port Sudan after concluding consultations in Nairobi. He's had a very constructive engagements with Sudanese stakeholders across the spectrum, as well as key interlocutors from the international community. This will help lay the groundwork necessary to support an inclusive process that can deliver a sustainable solution that preserves Sudan's sovereignty, its unity, and its territorial integrity. We look forward to working closely with the UN's regional partners, including the African Union, IGAD, and the League of Arab States, on the recommencement efforts towards an intra-Sudanese dialogue. Meanwhile, on the ground, the humanitarian situation continues to rapidly deteriorate in different parts of the country. Our colleagues tell us that in El Fasher, local sources report that heavy shelling and assaults late last week left at least 6 civilians dead and scores injured. The attacks also triggered further displacement. Essential services in the city are collapsing amid ongoing hostilities and lack of funding. Over the weekend, water trucking to the only functional hospital was suspended, while community kitchens have shut down due to depleted food supplies. Without urgent support, the most vulnerable people face severe hunger, even more difficult conditions than those they are currently experiencing. Meanwhile, heavy rains and flash floods continue to displace people, damage homes, and disrupt lives. Last Friday alone, over 4,000 people were displaced and 550,000 destroyed in Al Jazeera state. Many families still urgently need shelter and other basic assistance. In the capital Khartoum, OCHA last week saw how local authorities have made progress in restoring basic services and improving security. However, more than 800,000 people have returned to the city in recent months, still need urgent support to rebuild their lives. We call again for the immediate cessation of hostilities, the protection of civilians, the safe and unimpeded access for humanitarian goods, and increased international support to sustain life-saving operations across the country. And this morning, the members of the Security Council were briefed on the situation in Yemen, first by Hans Grunberg, our special envoy for Yemen, who said in recent weeks he held discussions with Yemeni interlocutors, including from the government of Yemen and Ansar Allah. He also met with representatives of regional countries as well as representatives of the broader international community. He emphasized in all his meetings the need for a nationwide ceasefire and an inclusive political process. For his part, Tom Fletcher, our humanitarian chief, who you'll hear from briefly, said that before February next year, 1 million people in Yemen are expected to be forced into extreme hunger, joining the 17 million Yemenis who have had too little to eat, which is almost half of the population in the country. Both, of course, stressed that the arbitrary detention of by the Houthis of 44 UN national staff, the forcibly entry in our offices, and the seizure of equipment endanger the very stability to advance peace efforts and deliver humanitarian support for those who need it. Those comments were shared with you. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, our colleagues at OCHA are telling us that we and our partners are supporting the government-led response to the Ebola outbreak in Kasai province. Data indicates there's been a sustained increase in suspected cases. As of yesterday, the province has reported a total of 43 suspected cases and 35 confirmed cases, which includes 27 deaths. Among the fatalities, 16 have been confirmed as Ebola virus. National health authorities are leading the response. Our partners working in health have also facilitated the early delivery of over 350 doses of the Ebola vaccine to the Bulape Health Zone, which remains the epicenter of the outbreak. We've also mobilized rapid response teams focusing on case detection and surveillance, clinical case management, infection and prevention control, and the risk communications and community engagement. Our health partners are mobilizing to contain the outbreak, but gaps in medical supplies and logistical capacity are hindering the response. Urgent funding for the Ebola response is needed. And you will have seen that over the weekend we issued a statement on Haiti in which the Secretary General strongly condemned the reported killing of at least 40 people, including women and children and the elderly, during a brutal attack by armed gangs in the Cabaret commune of Haiti's West Department. This happened during the night of 11 September. The Secretary General expresses his heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims, the people, and the government of Haiti. He is also alarmed by the level of violence rocking Haiti and urges the Haitian authorities to ensure that the perpetrators of these and all other human rights violations and abuses are brought to justice. He also calls on member states to expedite efforts towards strengthening the multinational security support mission, which requires logistics, it requires personnel, and obviously cash to effectively assist the Haitian National Police in addressing gang violence in Haiti in full respect with international human rights law. Turning to Ukraine, our colleagues in the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that hostilities are continuing over the weekend. Several civilians were killed and 40 injured in Donetsk between the 12th of September and today. Local authorities tell us that there is damage to nearly 190 civilian facilities in the region, including homes, schools, and a hospital. Hostilities have also continued in other parts of the country, damaging homes, farmland, and other civilian infrastructure. Nearly 5,000 people remain without electricity in the Zaporizhzhia region. Our humanitarian colleagues note that the continuing violence has forced more than 2,700 people to flee their homes between the 12th of September and the 14th. Humanitarian organizations are assisting evacuees at transit sites, providing hot meals, psychosocial support, and other emergency assistance. Some travel to announce by our friend Jean-Pierre Lacroix, the head of our Peace Operations Department. He is currently in the Republic of Korea and for today and tomorrow, and he will travel to China from the 16th to the 19th of September. In Seoul, he will meet with senior officials, including the Foreign Minister, Mr. Cho Hyun, and other representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of National Defense. Discussions will focus on Korea's important contributions to United Nations peacekeeping, as well as opportunities for future collaboration on peace and security, including peacekeeping. And in Beijing, he will participate in the 12th Beijing Xiangshan Forum, and he will also attend the 2025 Conference on Global Public Security Cooperation Forum, which is taking place in Liangyungang, highlighting China's ongoing contributions to UN policing and the importance of multilateral cooperation in addressing public security challenges. Today in Geneva, our friend Rebecca Greenspan, who, as you know, is the head of UNCTAD, delivered a message on behalf of the Secretary General at a special General Council meeting of the World Trade Organization. In the message, the Secretary General welcomed today's entry into force of the landmark WTO agreement on fisheries subsidies. Mr. Guterres said this is an agreement that is a vital step in protecting our oceans, advancing sustainable development, and called all to keep working to turn the tide towards healthy oceans, resilient communities, and a sustainable future for all. Today is the International Day of what, Edie? Democracy. It's a D. That's a good start. International Day of Democracy. In his message, the Secretary General says democracy is powered by the will of the people, their voices and choices. Just to flag that our friends at the UN Democracy Fund will host an event today at 3 p.m. in the Goals Lounge, which is by the neck area where the Express Bar used to be, to highlight how democratic participation can be transformed from voice to action. It will also be streamed on UN Web TV. Edie, yes, hang your head in shame.
Because Steph, is there any estimate of how many people in Gaza are actually unable to leave because of either age or disabilities?
I don't have any hard numbers. Our next guest may, but I can tell you is that the majority of people are unable to leave or choose not to leave, as they've been displaced over and over and over again. To seek safety in Gaza is impossible. And as we've also highlighted, the very high cost of transportation for families. Amélie.
Thanks, Steph. Brazilian officials have complained today that their delegation to high-level week next week have not received the visa from the US yet. I was wondering if you heard anything about that, and if you have any comment if the US are imposing visa restriction as well to other countries.
I mean, we've seen, I've seen the press reports. Obviously, it's concerning. We hope that the visas will be delivered. As we've stressed here, in the case of another delegation, the Palestinian delegation, the headquarters agreement between the U.S. and the U.S. calls for the U.S., our host government, to facilitate the travel to the United States of people having business in front of this organization. Benno, and then Michelle.
Thank you, Steph. German outlet Der Spiegel and the British Guardian and others published last week a comprehensive research about snipers of the Israeli army. This research lays out that these snipers allegedly killed unarmed Palestinians in Gaza and some Palestinians who wanted to help others who were shot already. Did you see these articles? Do you have a
yeah, I mean, I read the article. I saw the pictures, the X-ray pictures that were posted, which makes for harrowing reading. I think this is just another reason why there will need to be accountability, and there needs to be accountability for all the violations that we've seen in Gaza.
If it proves to be true that Israeli snipers killed unarmed civilians, would that amount to a war crime?
Look, what I can tell you is that the killing of civilians and the targeting of civilians, including children, is obviously against international humanitarian law.
You called for accountability. Does that mean you call for an investigation in this matter?
Yes, we do. And there are, I mean, as we've said here repeatedly, Benno, there are various mechanisms through which accountability can be had.
Sorry, please.
Please, thank you. Can be had. What is important is that the Israeli authorities cooperate with those mechanisms, which has yet to be the case.
Last one on this. One of the snipers is a German citizen. Do you also call on the German authorities to conduct accountability or conduct an investigation?
Everyone who is involved in what has happened in Gaza will need to look at their conduct. Abdelhamid. Oh, pardon, Michelle. Sorry, she's such a wallflower.
Oh. Thanks.
Yeah. That was a compliment. Yeah.
Just to follow up on Emily's question, have any other countries told the UN they're having issues with visas?
I haven't gotten an update from our legal office this morning. I will check if they have formally complained to us. But as I said, we've seen the press reports. There's still time between now and the general debate, so we do hope the visas will come through.
But also other countries?
Yeah, I will check.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay. And then has a meeting been locked in between the Secretary General and President Trump for next week?
We expect to have a bilateral on the first day, as the Secretary General and the U.S. President traditionally have. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Steph. I have a couple of questions. First, today is the 710th day after the massacre started in Gaza. So again, I will keep reminding you that the number of days should be mentioned in your briefing. So there's 425 died of famine, including 145 children. And I don't see also you don't shed light on people who died out of hunger.
I mentioned, Abdelhamid, with all due respect, this is what I read out to all of you. I read out the number of people who had died of hunger, and I specifically cited the number of children who had died of hunger. So what is your question?
My question is, when you mentioned that the UNRWA buildings had been attacked, 10 of them, 7 schools and 2 clinics, does that make a war crime? Clearly, and not like what Ms. Baerbock said. Yeah.
Hitting UN premises, which are well known to everyone, which are being used as shelters, goes against international humanitarian law.
But you can't classify it as a war crime.
Judicial authorities will have to make that determination. Yes, sir.
On a less serious matter.
Your microphone, please, because your microphone is a serious matter.
Thank you, Stefan. On a less serious matter, you've probably seen the reports about the postcard that was delivered 72 years later from here, from the United Nations. What does that say to you? That it took 72 years for a letter to be delivered.
Well, I'm probably still waiting for some mail, but I had not seen that story, so I'm happy to look into it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Steph. Chinese officials said China and the United States have concluded.
One second, please. Go ahead.
China and the United States have concluded a two-day talks in the three target issues. And the US has said the two sides have reached a comprehensive agreement on TikTok. Does the SG has any comments on the talk?
Look, I'm not going to have a comment on the substance of the talk, but I can tell you we welcome and we encourage high-level dialogue between the world's two biggest economies, because their economic relationship has an impact on the global economy. Okay. Deji.
Yeah. First, a clarification. When you mentioned about the visa issue, has the Palestinian delegation complained or not to the UN?
We've been in touch with them, yes.
I mean, they have already.
Well, we've been in touch with them, and we've raised their issue directly on the Palestinian issue in a number of meetings with the U.S. government.
What reaction? I mean, what response did you guys get?
You would have to speak to the U.S.
Okay.
Okay. Alex, and then Colin.
Thanks, Steph. Just a quick follow-up on Michelle's question. So you're expecting that the Secretary General will meet President Trump during the high-level week, right?
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Colin, and then. It's been so long, Colin. I know.
Hi. So are there, you mentioned the question about the Palestinian delegation. Are there other delegations that you have that raised concerns?
No, as I said, I'm not aware of any other delegations that have raised concerns directly to us. I will check after this briefing. My answer to Amélie is that I'd seen the press reports on that. Okay. Yes, sir. One second.
Thank you, Seth. Just I want to come back to the meeting between the Secretary General and President Trump. Can you share with us what are the topics that will be raised during this meeting?
Issues of mutual concern? Sinan.
Other than that?
That covers quite a bit, trust me. Sinan.
Thank you, Steph. As you know, the Syrian president, interim president, is coming to UN next, I think, during the UNGA.
Yeah.
So I wonder if he's going to meet with Secretary General, like one-to-one.
I have no doubt that, I don't have a confirmation because we don't have all the bilaterals yet, but I'm sure if one is requested, one will be granted. Pam.
Any sense, ballpark figure of how many heads of state and government the SG will meet with on a bilateral basis?
No, but we should have that before the week is over. Michelle, Beno, and Abdelhamid, then we'll go to our guest.
Just a question on security for the GA next week. Obviously, we know it's very, very tight anyway, but just in the wake of recent events in the United States, are there any plans to tighten security in any way?
I mean, the security within the UN complex is, during the J, is as tight as it can be. We are obviously in close contact with the host country authorities, Secret Service, State Department, and of course the NYPD. They will take the measures they need to take outside. I do expect a press briefing, I think Thursday morning outside the gates. That'll include UN security, Secret Service, NYPD, State Department, and others. We'll confirm that. What? A press briefing. So if you consider yourself part of the press, you would be welcome. I know. Benno.
The bilat between Mr. Guterres and Mr. Trump, would it be the first time they speak to each other since Trump was sworn in?
It would be the first official bilateral, yeah. I mean,
and there's no phone.
There was no phone call, as you know. I think they've exchanged words in different settings at summits. I mean, exchanged words in the most diplomatic and polite way.
Like, you mean-
They've greeted each other, I'm saying.
Were they texting?
Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Steph, again. If Prime Minister Netanyahu comes to the UN headquarters and wanted to meet with the Secretary, would the Secretary meet with a war criminal?
As you know, there is a standard operating policy in the agreement between the International Criminal Court and the United Nations Secretariat that allows senior UN officials to meet with people who may be indicted if it is in the furtherance of operational needs. If such a bilateral is scheduled, I will let you know. Chris.
Just on the visa issue, Steph, are you having to discuss any contingency plans should more countries be denied their visas to attend?
I think those are discussion. I mean, in terms of, let me be clear. There is no discussion that I've heard or seen about moving, right? We had this issue of misinformation last week. In terms of contingency plans of people being speaking via video, those are decisions that have to be made by the General Assembly membership. Okay. Yes, please.
Nepal has a new prime minister, as you may be aware now. Has the Secretary General been in touch with her, or will she be expected?
No, not yet. But we obviously welcome her appointment, and the UN stands ready to assist Nepal in this transitional and challenging moment. Pam.
Just to follow up on security. Do you expect that diplomats will have to go through metal detectors this year within the building?
I don't know. Last question in the back, please.
Does the SG have any comments on the adoption of the report on GA revitalization work? It was adopted September 5. Any comment on it? There's been, experts have said it's low on transparency and inclusion. Does the SG have any comment on that?
Far be it from the Secretary General to opine on General Assembly resolution. I mean, it's the work of the revitalization is important. I think that resolution, just more on a personal note, I think carries a lot of interesting information about the selection of the next Secretary General. Okay. Mr. Fletcher is happy to wait another half hour. Yeah.
Thank you, Steph. Real quick. Will the SG meet with Mr. Trump before the opening of the general debate? Will that bilateral?
No, the bilateral traditionally happens in the morning of the 11th once they've both done addressing. Mr. Fletcher, no more hiding. He's here. No. Tom, have you met these people? Exactly. Please, have a seat. Yeah. Please. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, we're delighted to welcome back Tom Fletcher, our emergency coordinator, our Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. So without further ado, Tom, I will give you the floor, and then we'll take some questions.
Terrific. And many thanks, Steph, for having me back, and colleagues for giving me some time today. I look forward to the questions. I'll try and be as brief as possible so we can get into the higher protein exchange I'm sure that we'll have ahead of us. I'll make just some general comments about where we are on particularly humanitarian reform, and as a sector, I can give you headlines on some of the major crises that are currently, and I assume will be in the future, crossing my desk, and then very happy to open up. So to start with High Level Week, for which obviously we're deep into the preparations. I think that maybe this is something that new people or newish people always say, but I think this is the most significant High Level Week that we've had for a long time, and really does define UN action going forward. We're in a situation now where there are many who would like to see the UN being weakened, which of course is a reckless act of self-harm. And so we have to push back against this crisis of of finance, yes, but also these challenges to our legitimacy and to our confidence. And as the SG has been leading with the UN80 process, there's a sense that change is essential right now. But we're not changing in benign waters. We're changing in the midst of a storm around us. And so what we've realized on the humanitarian side is that we need to grieve for what will go and what has gone. We need to fight for what must be saved. And we must imagine what we can be in the future. And I know that you'll be hearing more on that from the SG in the period to come. For the humanitarian part of this process, as we discussed last time I was here, we are facing this perfect storm. Underfunded, overstretched, under attack. The underfunded bit of it has, if anything, got worse since I was last here. So we've only been funded 19% of what we need, 19, just to be clear, which is a 40% drop on where we were last year. Devastating. Makes it an age of indifference. And as you know, those funding cuts have already meant that we have hyper prioritized our planning in order to target saving 114 million lives, which would cost $29 billion. Just to put that in perspective, that $29 billion is 1% of what the world will spend on defense this year. So what does that mean about the collective priorities? We're overstretched, as you've heard me say before, but just to update the evidence for that, millions now going without essential food, healthcare and protection. Programs to shield particularly women and girls have been slashed. Hundreds of aid organizations across this community have been shut down. The sector as a whole, I would estimate, has shrunk already by a third, even since I took over 10 months ago. It wasn't something I was planning to be saying. And if you listen, as I do, to our leading agencies, UNICEF, an extra 6 million kids are likely to be out of school. WFP are saying they can only reach 1 million of the 3 million Afghans who currently need food. UNHCR are saying that 11 million refugees may no longer get the help that they need. And, as Steph often reminds us, we're under attack. Last year, 380 plus aid workers killed, highest ever, 270 already this year. It's a record that I fear will break again. And that violence against us, and I'll come on to Yemen, for example, and of course, OPT, Gaza, is somehow being normalized. It's an age of impunity. And so a question that I wish was asked more is, where are these weapons coming from that are killing us and those we serve? They don't come out of nowhere. So what do we do? Well, for the UN, I think, but for the humanitarian sector, as we've done, the parameters are, firstly, reform, get the barnacles off the boat, if that's not too English an expression, dealing with the unnecessary layers and processes, duplication and dead weight, then regroup. We've got to build these fresh coalitions around those who really do need what we stand for, those at greatest risk of climate crisis and of conflict and of humanitarian catastrophe, those who most lose out in a strongman world. And then renew. And again, I know the SG will be setting out more ideas on this in the coming period. We've got to have an element of idealism and hope to how we renew, how we build that genuinely global organization, how we ensure that we are saving lives, building resilience, stopping conflict, defending rights, and how we prepare humanity for the impact of climate crisis and artificial intelligence. On the humanitarian reset, we're now well into that implementation phase. That old model is gone. And we mourn the consequences of that for those that we serve, but we won't stick around and be held up from actually then pushing through the changes we need to make sure that we save as many lives as we can with the money that we have. So you'll see more, I hope, direct assistance, cash in people's hands. You'll see women and girls at the heart of the response. Simpler, faster appeals, more local leadership, more responsibility and power closer to the communities that we serve. You'll see us scaling up our pooled funds so that the majority of resources reach local organizations. And you'll see us launching the foundations, laying the foundations for that more radical renewal of the humanitarian mission by 2030. Greener, more anticipatory, more preventive, more efficient, more local. I'll be very brief on the headline country crises because I know that you'll want to dive deeper into those. Gaza OPT, as you hear from Steph, more than 500,000 people face catastrophic hunger. We fear that number could exceed 640,000 by the end of this month. As I said in Geneva, after the last IPC report, it's a preventable, a predictable famine. But we can stop it. Gaza's women, elderly, children can't eat. Statements of concern. And a reminder, as so often, during the ceasefire earlier this year, when I was in Gaza, thousands of truckloads of aid entered, proving that we can save lives at scale if humanitarians are allowed to do that. So, we need the crossings open, we need functional access, we need unimpeded safe passage inside Gaza, we need the looting to stop, we need the hostages to be released, we need a ceasefire now. And all of this, of course, is against a backdrop where the rules of war are being corroded day by day. We've heard Israeli ministers talking openly about flattening Gaza and forcing people out permanently, bombing food aid, and so on. And I've said consistently, I don't think that we have to choose between condemning the starvation of civilians in Gaza and demanding the unconditional release of hostages. We must do both. We don't have to choose between fighting anti-Semitism and holding Israel to the same laws as everyone else. We must do both. I've just come from a call with our excellent humanitarian coordinator, resident coordinator in OPT. And the simple version of our plan to stop the Gaza famine, ceasefire, hundreds of trucks a day, full access, safe routes, end the bureaucratic delays, restore power and water, and allow commercial traffic. None of that is complicated. Sudan will be a big theme for High Level Week. As you know, largest humanitarian crisis in the world, more than 500,000 people now in famine-like conditions. 30 million people need aid, and sexual violence, as I've been hearing from Sudanese NGOs in the last few days, is rampant. Particular focus on trying to get this siege of El Fasher lifted. 900,000 people there in desperate, desperate need of our life-saving work. That will be a big theme of the coming days. Syria, looking to see how we can use the visit of the president and his team to ensure we've got the right balance in the conversation between the humanitarian imperative and that longer-term development and resilience and reconstruction effort that will allow the people of Syria, as they wish to reduce that dependence on humanitarian aid. So a real moment, I think, another big theme for High Level Week is getting that right. Last couple, Haiti. I was in Haiti last week for 3 days and saw crisis hitting from all sides, the violence, displacement, collapsing services. I do encourage you to read the articles that Jacqueline Charles wrote for the Miami Herald. She was with me for that time, and she can articulate much more eloquently than I can what we saw. The violence has to end. I saw the last functioning hospital in Port-au-Prince pushed to the brink. Real concern over the sustainability of that operation. I met young people trapped by violence but who are finding ways to rebuild their lives. Spoke with many of the IDP families living in the most unthinkable conditions. And most challenging, spent a long meeting with survivors of gender-based violence who have faced just unspeakable and repeated attacks. Quiet courage, but they should not have to be asked to show such courage. So we're doing all we can there. I've just come from a conversation with the team in country, but it's one of the crises alongside DRC and Afghanistan where the funding cuts are hitting hardest, less than 12% of what we need. Afghanistan, I've discussed here before. The challenges. I think I've visited since I last joined you and went to Kandahar, Kunduz, Kabul. Of course, the recent earthquakes have then devastated nearly 500,000 people, claiming thousands of lives, many homes destroyed, livelihoods decimated. And so we have a flash appeal out at the moment to respond to that earthquake. If I can just add, and it may come up later, our female humanitarian workers and the women that we're working with in country are absolutely indispensable to the humanitarian response in Afghanistan. And it is intolerable that they're coming under further pressure, further challenges in the work they are doing. We cannot do our work without them. Finally, Yemen, where again there's been a huge focus in the last 2 weeks really, since those additional detentions of our staff. I've just told the Security Council that it's intolerable that at a time of funding cuts, when we're already facing security threats, that those who are trying to save lives in Yemen are being detained and challenged in this way. Utterly unacceptable, as the SG has said. And I echo, of course, his call for their immediate, unconditional release. Shall I stop there, Steph? Is that too much?
Well, it's too late now. No, it's not too much. Sorry. Edie.
Mr. Fletcher, thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. A couple of follow-ups to what you've just said. You started out saying that this is the most significant high-level week and that there were people threatening to see the UN being weakened. Can you tell us what countries, what people, who you see as those people actually trying to destroy the United Nations? Secondly, you said that the humanitarian overall appeal this year was only 19% funded. Could you give us the figure for this year and for last year? And third, one of the big issues is donors. Do you see other countries stepping up to fill in the gap left by the huge cuts in funding from the United States? Thank you.
Please go ahead, Tom.
So I'll let you speculate on who I might be thinking of in terms of this challenge to how the UN operates. Let me say that one thing that struck me in the short time I've been in the job is the amount of support, actually increasingly loud support for what we stand for. And lots of member states stepping forward and saying this isn't an organization that is owned by the big powers, owned by the post-45 Security Council. It's an organization that does belong to all of us and, of course, belongs to our citizens as well. And so I think you're hearing a lot more pushback there against the notion of a sort of strongman, transactional, survival of the fittest world. We know where that leads, and we know why we were created as an institution. And it's unfashionable in a way to be defending institutions at the moment and defending structures and hierarchies and order. But the alternative is disorder and chaos. So we know very clearly why we're here, and we know what we need to be fighting for. On the numbers, so to date this year, 19% received. That's $8.7 billion. out of the $45.5 billion requested in the global humanitarian overview that I launched back in December. So that's a 40% drop on last year. I don't have the number for last year, but as Steph would probably tell you, you can probably do the maths from there. You see, I do read all the transcripts, Steph. I'm trying to learn from the master. Remind me. Donors. Well, this is an important point. I think we've recognized as the humanitarian community that the US was footing too high a proportion of the bill. Now, I don't want to see any of that money cut because it has an impact on our life-saving work, but maybe we were over-reliant, whatever it was, 40 to 50% on that donor. And of course, that US money has saved hundreds of millions of lives over a long period. And so I think it's right that we try to share that burden around more fairly. It's obviously a message that we hear loud and clear from the new administration. I've heard it again in the last couple of days.
Thank you. Bisan?
Thank you very much. Bisan Abukwik with Al Jazeera Arabic. I just want to go back to something that you just said about the attacks against humanitarians and the violence against them, and on Gaza in particular. And you're saying it has become normalized in the age of impunity. And you're asking the question that you would want to hear, where are the arms coming from? On Gaza in particular, where scores of humanitarians have been killed, are you implying that more pressure should be applied on countries for an arms embargo or stop the arming Israel? This is one question. And my second question is, back in May at the Security Council, you called on Security Council members to act decisively to prevent a genocide. You were criticized for using the word genocide, but since then, the International Association of Genocide Scholars have concluded that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. Do you feel vindicated at this point?
So in terms of the attacks on humanitarians, and think of Gaza, of course, in that context, that's where the majority have been, but we've seen it also in recent weeks in Ukraine, where we've lost NGO colleagues. I've mentioned Yemen, Haiti. In all of these crises, we're facing increasing risks. And those weapons are not coming from nowhere, as I say. The weapons that are killing us, our people, who are going out towards the sound of gunfire in order to try and save lives. And so I do want more of a conversation about not just the legal obstacles that should be put in front of the attacks on us, or the sort of sense of impunity, but also physically the damage that's being done to us and to those we serve. Now, I don't know about arms embargoes and those other questions there for the political colleagues, but I don't want my people, our people, to be killed. That goes for the courageous humanitarian workers and those we serve. And they're being killed in increasingly sophisticated ways. That is one of the really alarming things, even in 10 months in this job. Increasing use of lethal autonomous weapons, drones and so on, which are then targeting our installations and our people. And Steph has already talked about, even in the last couple of days, implications of that for some of our properties in Gaza. On those issues that I raised in that Security Council briefing back in May, it's not about me being vindicated or anything else. I think everyone, people are speaking out clearly in public on what needs to change, what we're seeing. It's not for me, again, to get into the legal minutiae of all of this, but we need a ceasefire. We need this to stop. And we must continue to speak out boldly to that effect.
Thanks. Amélie Bottelier from AFP News Agency. You were just in Haiti, and it's a country that have been deprived of a lot of media coverage because a lot of us cannot go there. You've been there, so can you describe what is it to live? How is it to live in Port-au-Prince? I mean, we know that 90 or 95% of the capital is controlled by the gangs, but what does that mean for the population? And what did the population tell you about what they want from the international community, and especially is there any need for this new anti-gang force that the US is now promoting in the Security Council? Thank you.
So they described to me, and you could see it in their eyes, and you'll see it in the videos that we've put out of that trip. I mean, they're just terrified. Moving across Port-au-Prince day to day, utterly terrifying. Going through those checkpoints where you can be abducted, shaken down for money, taken hostage. It's utterly, the Center for Therapeutic Support to Victims of Sexual Violence that I visited at the end of the trip. People talk about the need for that and the way they talk about the need for a pharmacy on the corner or a local school. It's like, well, of course, in our neighborhood, we have a pharmacy, a supermarket, and a center for the victims of sexual violence. And the women I met there describe how they are taking contraception in advance of going through checkpoints because they're anticipating the sexual violence they know they'll face, just going about their daily lives. So the level of brutality from the armed groups, the level of fear is really terrifying. And people want to be heard, they want to be supported. Mostly they ask for dignity. And at the moment, they don't feel they have dignity. And the conditions in the IDP site I visited were, as difficult as any I've seen in the 10 months in this job.
Colin? Thank you. Colin Lynch from DevX News. Just a couple more questions on numbers. You said that the humanitarian sector has shrunk by about a third. And I don't know if you have hard figures on that. Also, if you could just give us some sense of the scale of staff budget cuts in OCHA specifically, and what that, both in terms of staff and funding this year. And then finally, if you just can give us some sense, you talk about this being the most important UNGA in many years. For someone like you who's advocating for humanitarian issues, what do you do during the week? Who do you meet with? What are you asking for? And, given the climate, is there really, do you have much hope that you're going to come out of this with a better, financial picture than you have now? One other thing, just on the question you brought up about weapons, I don't see why the UN couldn't collect sort of forensic evidence of weaponry that's used in the battle and bring, it's the sort of thing that the panel of experts uses all the time to draw attention to what weapons are being used. Thanks. Sorry, go on.
Many thanks, Colin. So that figure of about a third is across the whole, the sector as a whole. So that was drawn from the meeting that we had, the last IASC principals meeting back in June. I think the worst of those cuts have actually fallen on local and national NGOs, many of which are dependent on those shorter term funding contracts. But you're seeing that equally across the big international NGOs as well, and of course across the UN humanitarian family. We have, as part of the SG's UN 80 initiative, we have a humanitarian cluster of 5 of those agencies, and across that cluster we're probably at about sort of 30% to a third reductions over time. So it's an enormous amount to be taking out of the formal sector. In OCHA itself, we're going through very, very tough choices right now. We've restructured, but we're losing 20 to 25% of our staff across OCHA. And these are people who are utterly committed humanitarians, who are vital to the coordination effort, but who we cannot afford to hold on to in this new funding context. The week itself, I'll tell you in a week and a half what it was like. Speed dating. Anyone who says it's the city that never sleeps probably hasn't been here during high-level week. They might have been here during some other weeks. So it's full on. I can't remember, someone may hold up a number at the back, how many bilaterals I have, but I have an immense number of bilaterals with ministers, development colleagues, heads of government, and so on. I join many of the SG's meetings where there is a humanitarian dimension. We have side events, sort of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I'll be eating for the United Nations over that, over the course of the week. So immense amounts on, trying to keep the focus, as you say, on these humanitarian crises that we're dealing with, trying to make sure that they're getting the space that they deserve on everyone's calendars, and as you're rightly saying, it comes back to Edie's point, trying to see if we can broaden out that wider member state and donor support for what we do. So talking not just to our established donors, but to potential and emerging donors. Not everyone is reducing their funding right now.
Michelle, then Abdelhamid.
Thank you. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. Sorry, just another follow-on. When you talk about the sector shrinking as a third, would you solely attribute that to the US cuts? And then you were talking about it, the opportunity to reform humanitarian work, and you mentioned sort of cutting some dead weight. What does dead weight in the humanitarian sector look like? And then thirdly, sorry, just everyone else got lots of questions, so I'll go for a third. There seems to have been a bit of a truce between the UN and the GHF in Gaza. What's happening there? Have there been any further discussions between the UN and GHF? Has the GHF sort of changed in any way that might convince the UN to work with them at all, or is the stats still the same? Thank you.
Great. So the US cuts are obviously the biggest proportion of the funding cuts that we faced, but it's not just the US that has signalled it's cutting back. Several other bilateral donors are in a similar position, proportionally, actually. So it's a wider challenge to us. The dead weight in the system, perhaps dead weight is not a fair way to describe all of it, but there have been too many layers through the sector. The sector itself, often in the more expensive capitals of the world, has been big. And I think it's that model which is now being changed. Incidentally, I was looking at big efficiencies across the sector before Elon Musk and Doge and others started talking about chainsaws and so on. We recognize ourselves, because we are close to those we serve, we recognize why we need to be more efficient. And so across, for example, the IASC, and some of you like Colin will know this stuff inside out, we are reducing the number of clusters by almost half, these different sectoral clusters, to organize the sector. We're reducing the number of in-person meetings, we're reducing the number of layers, and we're shifting more power and resource to in-country teams, in-country leadership. And so I've been talking about the 4 Ds, define more clearly the 114 million lives that we can save, devolve more power to leadership in country and to local communities, deliver much more effectively, and that brings in the ways in which we can use innovation and technology, as well as taking out bureaucracy and inertia from the system. And then the 4th D is defend, and being full-throated in our unequivocal defense of the values that underpin this work and the people we serve.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Abdelhamid Sayam.
You're right. You're right. You're right. I think I've spoken. That wasn't a deliberate. No, you've heard me at length in Security Council and elsewhere. We believe in the importance of principled, neutral delivery of humanitarian aid in line with humanitarian principles. And we're not in a conversation. Yes, now and again you hear that we're in a conversation about putting UN supplies through GHF or other mechanisms like it, and that's not a conversation that we've been having.
Thank you, sir. Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I want to go back to the same question, posed by my colleague Bisan, I didn't find the answer convincing. On May 13th, sir, you mentioned the word genocide. From that day on, because you were strongly criticized, the Israeli ambassador asked you to apologize for it. You never went back to the same term. Same thing with the Secretary General when he mentioned that October 7 did not come from vacuum, and he was criticized. He never went back to that same term. Now, from August 11 until today, 11,000 buildings were destroyed, building and residential building, towers and residential building. There is over 9,000, sir, in detention. Some of them never been tried. So, over 400 children. And never mentioned in your briefing about these unfairly detained. Only you mentioned the 20 hostages, which is, I agree. I mean, they should be released with no condition. But at least mention the thousands of Palestinians, including doctors, including humanitarian workers who are in detention. I think you know about the doctor who been detained. So my question, why you don't say it the way it is? Are people terrified of Israel? Not to say the truth and what's going on? Thank you.
Hamid, I mean, I don't think I've been terrified of Israel. I don't think I've been terrified of speaking out. You cite, as Hassan did, you know, that May 13 statement and others I've made in the Security Council. You can Google all my interviews. You know, I'm talking about this issue consistently, and I'm not rowing back. I didn't pull back from those comments. I stand by every word I said in that Security Council briefing and the subsequent Security Council briefings. You know, obviously I could come here when we've got more time and do a full briefing just on OPT, but I was trying to cover the range of crises that we're dealing with. But, you know, and Steph every day does this in great detail. We're not resiling from telling you what we see. We feel it's our duty to bear testimony to what we're seeing.
Sherwin Riceby's South African Broadcasting. Mr. Fletcher, let's go back to that May Council meeting, if we will. Your words exactly were, will you act to the Council, will you act decisively to prevent genocide and ensure respect for international humanitarian law? I wonder what your assessment is of the Council's response some 4 months later, and what might your recommendations be to that Council based on the response you'll give me now?
It's a good question, and it's a fair question. I think it's a question best directed, dare I say it, to the council members themselves in the way that I was directing it to them. I think you have seen a more outspoken position by many members of the council. Stronger pressure for our humanitarian access, stronger pressure for a ceasefire. You've seen that in public and private from many of them. And some of that is having an effect around the margins. We are getting a little bit more aid in than we were getting in, a bit of an uptick, but it's still completely insufficient for what is needed, which is why I set out those steps that we need to see in order to prevent the famine and to ensure that we can reach people at scale. So, work in progress, I think, is the short version of that answer.
Chris Reyes with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Thank you for this briefing. Mr. Fletcher, as we head into what you call a highly consequential, high-level week, can you reflect on what you believe to be the causes of the erosion of trust and confidence in this institution?
Wow. I mean, I used to write books and give lectures on that, so I'll try and keep it short. I think a lot of this goes back to the financial crash of 2008, 2009, and the way in which, rather than turning outwards, the world turned inwards after that. And we've seen that across so many societies. Rise of nationalism, rise of polarization. I think there's a second huge cause, which is growing inequality and a frustration that many people feel, understandably, that the system, as a collective, beyond the UN, but the international system, has not gone far enough to address that. And I think it also comes down to this more sort of existential fear we all increasingly have about the impacts of climate change, about what all this technological change around us will mean for the world in which we live in. And people are anxious to see collective responses to that. Now, at a more tactical level, you can point to the sometimes paralysis in the Security Council, which has made it much, much harder to act in a bold enough way. And this is why the SG has launched the UN80 initiative. We should always be thinking about how we can be more effective, more streamlined, and more focused on delivering for the people we serve.
Pam, then Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Good to see you back. Pamela Falk from U.S. News and World Report. Back to your comment about the U.S. footing more than they might of the bill. It sounds like you have had some conversations with U.S. officials to get to that point. Is it at the Washington, you mentioned Elon Musk, is it at the Washington level or DOGE level, or is it US-UN that has more of the day-to-day conversations with you? And we've seen quite a few briefings of different agencies talking about private sector. Are you looking at the private sector? I mean, they've got a lot of money, and they're giving out a lot of money these days. More than governments seem to be. Have you looked at that, and is that a possibility?
So short version, Pam, on where the engagements are, everywhere. So I've been in Washington even in the last couple of days, in very close touch with the US Chargé here in New York, US Chargé in Geneva. When I visit crisis countries, as I did in Haiti, I often touch base with the US rep there as well. So I saw Henry Worcester a couple of days ago in Haiti. So there is that's a load-bearing conversation, and there's an important engagement there because just as everywhere else, we need to listen. Private sector is an interesting part of this. I did an event a couple of weeks ago in Geneva with World Economic Forum where we're looking at where the private sector can play more of a role. It's one of those never-ending conversations, and it's often something, it will be in the notes somewhere that we say we need more support from private sector. We've got to find ways to make that more practical. And I've always thought that rather than us saying, we have a plan, it costs this much, give us some money, we should be saying, here are some massive challenges we have to crack. Can we solve them together? Where is it in your interest to help us crack these problems? And I find that opens up a more practical conversation with the private sector. And it's a conversation I have indeed been having with the Americans about how do we ensure that we bring them into the conversation to a greater extent.
Thank you. Thank you. Jessica?
Thank you so much for the briefing, Mr. Fletcher. Jessica Le Masurier from France 24. Continuing on the private sector, have you or will you meet with Johnny Moore or anybody else from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation? If you've met already, what did you discuss? Would you consider partnering with them in any way? If you've not met with them, why not? What are your concerns?
Well, it's one of the aspects of my job here that we meet everyone. It's the nature of the job, and there've been a well-publicized contact with the GHF. As I said in answer to one of the earlier questions, we have no intention of working through their mechanism, but we do have an interest in promoting this conversation about the importance of neutral, independent humanitarian aid delivery. And that's a point we make to everyone, including them.
So you met in person with Johnny Moore, did you?
This was an in-person meeting. Yes, it was. It has been well covered, I think, in the last few weeks. The new Humanitarian have got most of the detail on it.
If there would be any partnership.
So as I say, we're not putting UN impartial aid through the mechanism. There was a conversation about the conditions on the ground and how can we overcome the challenges that we described, the obstacles that we face on the ground. And we restated, as we do in all of these conversations, our commitment to the way in which we deliver aid and the fact that we can do this at scale. We know how to do this. As I say, we were getting in 500, 600 trucks a day during the ceasefire, and we've now faced deliberate obstacles to that work. And we want everyone to hear what those obstacles are and we want them addressed.
Thank you, Sinan. Then Deji.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. My name is Sinan Tunçdemir from Ruda Media Network on Syria. You just said looking to see how we can use the visit of the president of Syria and his team. So I wonder if you are going to meet him, what will be your message to him? I mean, the reason I'm asking that, how satisfied are you with the transitional government when it comes to like delivering the humanitarian aids and cooperating with them? Especially, like, for example, we see what's happening there. I mean, since they've been in charge, more than 10,000 civilians got killed, and we see like thousands of displacements. So, giving effect, and what's your and how satisfied are you? And I have a second question, if you don't mind. Do you or your team has any specific plan for Afrin city, which is the northwest Syria, since the Turkish military operation, more close to like 100,000 people displaced, and now the families are trying to go back to their home, but they can't find their home because there are settlers, even they can't find their olive trees. And do you have any specific plan for Afrin city? Thank you very much.
So we want access everywhere in Syria as elsewhere. We don't want any impediments on where we can work, and our teams on the ground are regularly going out and doing recce visits to see what the needs are and where we can best help. So we're constantly adjusting the plan to make sure we're reaching people who most need our help. I think, on the Syrian president's visit, I think it will probably be one of the most visible parts of High Level Week, alongside a couple of other fairly high-profile visits. I think from the humanitarian perspective, we share with the Syrian authorities this desire to move from being dependent on humanitarian support to that more resilient development model. We have an interest, and we share that with the Syrian authorities, in the humanitarian part of the system not needing to be in Syria. Here, in fact, everywhere, I want to put us out of business, ideally. We shouldn't be putting down deep roots. And there, we've had very encouraging conversations with them along the way, including when I visited back in December. And it's a practical conversation. Getting the checkpoints open, getting the border crossings open, ensuring that we have access wherever we need to go. And I'm sure I'll continue that when I see them next week.
Deji, then Linda, two quick last good questions, and so we're going to have to let Mr. Fletcher.
Yes, Ms.
So you said you are meeting with the president? I think that was the question. You said you are meeting with the president?
So certainly, as Steph said earlier on, SG is certainly meeting with the president. I haven't yet seen whether I'm on the dance card for that meeting, but I certainly will be getting together with the foreign minister and expect in some way to be encountering the president as well.
Okay, Mr. Fletcher.
Quick questions, go ahead.
Shudaji with Transcendental Television. Very quick question. You just mentioned that humanitarian workers are under attack. It's not physically. They are also being criticized. For example, in Gaza, the humanitarian operation, as well as you yourself, has been attacked by Israeli authority. Do you consider this a scapegoat for the Israeli authority who's responsible for the humanitarian situation in Gaza, or do you think it's a systematic stigmatization of the humanitarian workers? And what is the danger of that? Thank you.
So it's my job to speak out and say what we see, particularly because you can't get in to witness and report on that yourselves. When you do it, you expect to get a certain amount of lively reaction, and I've experienced that. But it's not about me. I mean, being criticized in a Security Council statement or, at sort of press conference here is nothing compared to what the people of Gaza are experiencing, or indeed so many of the other millions of people that we're here to serve are experiencing. So I think there's a completely different scale to that, and we just have to keep focused on saving lives and being honest about what we see.
Linda?
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Apropos of the...
Your microphone a little closer.
I'm sorry. Apropos of delivery of aid in Gaza, you said it's part of your business to meet with all sides. You met with GHF, et cetera. How satisfied are you with, there is a war going on. How satisfied are you with Hamas's behavior in terms of allowing and facilitating the delivery of humanitarian aid? After all, the United States and Israel both say that there's been looting and they have been embedded with civilians and taking food. And what are your thoughts?
So we are facing massive amounts of looting of our convoys, but we assess that most of that is coming from desperate civilians, absolutely starving, trying to feed their families, or from some of the armed gangs that operate, with seeming impunity around those areas that we then have to drive through on those very pre-scripted routes that we're given to drive along. Our assessment is that Hamas are broadly staying out of the way of the aid distribution, which we do through community networks and so on. We haven't hit major obstacles from them, but of course, they've got to release the hostages. That is an obstacle clearly, and we need some sort of transition to a better system for running Gaza as a whole. So they haven't been a major impediment to what we're doing. Can I guarantee that every grain of rice that gets looted from our lorries doesn't end up on the market in some way or doesn't get stolen by a Hamas fighter? No, it's impossible in those chaotic conditions to guarantee that. But we feel very confident that we have a system that ensures the majority does get to civilians. If we're allowed to operate, if we could flood Gaza with hundreds of trucks a day, the looting would go away. The prices in the markets would come down. So we know we can do that, and we can do that even in these incredibly difficult conditions that exist.
Have you met with Hamas about this?
We meet with absolutely everyone, as I say, all the time in every environment we work, that we work in.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you. Sorry to everybody.
Thank you.